My name is Sandy Larson, and I am the Assistant Director of Alumni Events. I work in our Boise office and oversee a lot of our virtual events as well as chapter events around the country. Today, this is our 24th Cup of Joe. We started these clearly during the pandemic, but even though the pandemic has winded down, we are still have a demand and love to showcase our alumni, faculty, and our staff. So today we are joined by Vanessa Sielert from Lionel Hampton School of Music, as well as Navin Chettri. I am going to just serve as your host today. Vanessa is going to interview and talk with Navin, so they'll have a wealth of questions. If you have any questions for us, please do not unmute. Sorry. Please do not unmute. Just direct those directly to me in a private message, and I will ask them at the end. We should have about 20 minutes at the end of today's session to ask questions. So if he doesn't touch on them during the conversation, be sure to ask with a private message. Make sure you stay muted during the whole session, just to not interrupt their conversation. And I am going to turn it over to Vanessa. I'm going to give a little bit of background about Vanessa. Vanessa Sielert is the director of the Lionel Hampton School of Music and an educational advisor for the Lionel Hampton Jazz Festival. As a professor in the Lionel Hampton School of Music, she has taught courses in saxophone and jazz studies. She's also served as professor of saxophone at the Lionel Hampton School of Music and on the faculties of Pacific Lutheran University, Seattle Pacific University, and Southern Illinois University in Carbondale. She received a Bachelor of Music in Music Education. I'm sorry, I'm stumbling over my words tonight. Bachelor of Music in Music Education and Saxophone Performance from the University of Idaho, a Master of Music in Saxophone Performance from Baylor University, and a Doctor of Musical Arts in Saxophone Performance and Pedagogy from the University of Illinois. She studied saxophone with Robert Miller, Michael Jacobson, and Deborah Richtmeyer. She has performed with a wide range of performing groups, including the Palouse Jazz Project, the Bob Curnow Big Band, the Tacoma Symphony Orchestra, and the Civic Orchestra of Chicago. As an administrator, Sielert has led the Lionel Hampton School of Music for over 5 years. During this time, she has partnered with the School of Grammy Museum in Los Angeles as Grammy Museum University affiliate and has started the Lionel Hampton / Grammy Museum Collective, a university student ensemble comprised of members from university affiliates. She's also guided the department through a major building renovation to be completed this spring. I'm going to turn it over to you, Vanessa.
Thank you, Sandy, and thanks for having us today.
Sure.
And that was a huge introduction for not the person of the hour. The person of the hour is Navin Chettri, who came to the Lionel Hampton School of Music full-time just this January, and we're so happy to have him as our Lionel Hampton Jazz Festival manager. But prior to doing that, Navin actually graduated from the University of Idaho, Lionel Hampton School of Music with his undergraduate in 11, I think, and his master's degree in 13, and he has taught for us several courses, including our World Beat Music Ensemble and percussion lessons, and we are so happy to have him join us full-time as our Jazz Festival manager. So welcome, Navin.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Glad to be here, and thanks for everybody joining us today.
Yeah, and so I think I'll just get going right into a little bit of background about you, Navin. Can you talk a little bit about your background in music and some of your earliest memories of making and enjoying music?
I feel very fortunate that I grew up in a household where they had a lot of music, so at home, I used to wake up with music being played in the house. My mom, they would wake up way early, so there'd be some Indian classical music playing in the house, and during daytimes it'd be Nepali folk music. So just to give a little background as in context, as in where this is coming from, I grew up in this little town in the northeast of India called Darjeeling. It's about like 5,000 meters high, one of the highest railway stations considered in the world. And, if you've heard about Darjeeling tea, that's where it's from. It's not a name of a brand, but it's the name of that place called Darjeeling. So it's this beautiful hill station with rolling hills that have tea gardens, But so the dominant inhabitants of that place are ethnic Nepali people from Nepal. So there's a whole story, the history behind how that happened. But anyways, at home, it was Indian classical music and Nepali folk music. But in school, since Darjeeling was also one of, during the time when the British were there in India, it used to be one of the summer capitals, so they had built schools and hospitals and, clubs and racing courses, so it was this place where in the summer they would come and spend their time with their family and send their kids to school there. So later, in our time, some of those schools, they're still around. So I was very fortunate to have the chance to go to a school where we had teachers from around the world. I thought that was kind of like normal then, it's just like, oh, this is just like it. All schools have this, like, what's the big deal? And later on, I realized how privileged we were that we had some of these fantastic teachers. My principal was from Australia. Our English teacher, Mr. Blackmore, was from Liverpool, England. We had a geography teacher who was from Germany. Our music teacher was Mr. Glasby. He was from the United States. So we got introduced to a lot of rock and roll music then. So that was my introduction to the Western aspect of music. We had a great music program in school. We had a choir, we had the orchestra. We had Mr. Blackmore, who did annual, musicals, Broadway musicals. So like that was a big part of my education. So from very young, I guess I was just kind of exposed to so much diverse music and culture that way, that kind of became my thing as I grew up. I'm realizing now, looking back, is like, wow, why do I gravitate to all of these different aspects of music and culture from around the world? Is because I think I was just surrounded by it growing up, in Darjeeling and being in Mount Hermon School. So I had the Western influence from my school, from Western classical to rock and roll music to the pop music that was happening in the United States or in Europe. We'd hear all the Billy Joel tunes and all the pop that was happening in the 80s. So, but at home, and it was mostly Nepali folk music and Indian classical music. So there was a lot of music happening for me, and I was really into it, I think, from very early on. My first performance, if I remember it right, was before kindergarten. So I was 4 years old, I think. I performed on stage. Singing was my first instrument. So, so yeah. And then from there on, music was such an attraction for me that I gravitated to various kinds of music throughout my career, So if somebody asked me, like, what kind of music did you play? I'd probably say, like, I played from rock and roll music to classical music to Indian classical music to pop to reggae to funk to, the list could go on, but it was just the nature in me to be attracted to all these different styles, so always hungry for something new.
What an amazing upbringing.
Yeah, no, I feel very fortunate.
Yeah.
I really realized that, like, wow, that's pretty cool.
So you started out as a vocalist originally, but what drew you to the percussion instruments?
I started off as a vocalist in the sense I loved singing, and at home we always had music, and my parents and my bigger family, they were all into music. They were not professional musicians, but we would always have jam sessions at home, so there would, once a week, there would be music happening with somebody play the tabla or somebody play a little guitar, so there was always family involved, and so kind of a gathering. It was a big family. So I used to sing, but my dad used to play the tabla. He was a self-taught tabla player. Tabla is this North Indian percussion instrument. It's one of the most popular instruments in Asia. he used to play the tabla, and I used to watch him play. So, it was always that attraction. Oh, let me try. I couldn't. So he kind of knew that, I was really interested. So one day he came home with a guruji, we call it, a master, a teacher, So I started getting tabla lessons. I think I was probably like 4th or 5th grade. I started getting into tabla lessons every Saturday. Fakira Guruji was, Ustad Fakira was my teacher. He's my first teacher. And so I really got into it, but it's also interesting because I just still remember Dad waking me up at 5 in the morning going like, get up, you got to get up. You need to start practicing. Do you know how these guys practice? Like the time they spend, the energy. He used to, I'll be all eyes like, okay, start practicing 5 in the morning. But I really got into it. So later on, it was more like Dad started like, okay, you got to focus on your music. Your studies too now. So how do we balance that out, right? So I did my tabla for about 3 or 4 years. And then somehow he felt that I was getting too much into it. I had to take a break. That was my dad. So I had to take a break. And I picked it up later in my life, but I did take a break then. So that's how percussion was kind of got instilled in me. I really loved it, the sound of it. But I wasn't a drum set player. I was more of a, it was a rock and roll band we had in college. We had this 4-piece band, and I used to play the guitar and sing. It was a typical rock and roll. We'd do tunes from the Doors, Beatles tunes. There's this awesome band from Ireland called Thin Lizzy. It's a rock and roll band. Incredible, So anyway, all the classic rock stuff. So it was long hair. I had we did the whole thing. But drums was something I had to pick up because there was no choice, kind of thing. It was a situation we got into where we didn't have a drummer and into it. There are some really long stories. That was a lot of long and winding, amazing stuff. I think when I think back now, it feels like, man, I'm glad we had that experience. It was crazy, but then, the moment it was kind of wild. But when I think about it now, it was like, oh man, that was cool. So yeah. So you want to hear my story about how I got into drums?
Yeah, sure. Tell more about how you got into drums. Then I want to find out more about your journey into jazz, but let's talk about drums first. So,
high school was over. We had this little band going on in high school. We used to play in, school concerts and all of that. But the guys were into it, and I was really into it. So when we got into college, we continued with the band, Some guys went off and others, but like I was kind of like, got into the band. I was really into it. So college happened, and I think I was first year of college. Our college, slightly different than here. We didn't have music as a major that you could opt for. We had very limited degrees, right? So it was more like science, arts, and kind of commerce, business, right? So those were the 3 choices. I kind of went for business, and again, now I think about it, probably that year was pretty good. Because I got into the business aspect of music quite a bit in my life, But that first year, so I was a commerce student, and we had this band, and the band was sounding pretty good, and we got this invitation to play in Kathmandu, Nepal, for a Christmas New Year gig. And again, trying to cut it short, we got this gig in Kathmandu. From one thing led to the other, and we landed up with this contract to play a 1-year performance at this club in a casino at a 5-star hotel. There's a whole story to that. But we landed up with this situation where we would be paid monthly salary to play at this club. It was 3 nights a week. You'd play 1.5 hours. It was great pay. We were just coming out of college. We were kind of like, wow, living the dream here kind of thing, because it's like suddenly that kind of life seemed like, man, this is it. We got to do it, kind of thing. So I remember going back home and telling my dad that, hey, I'm going to pursue music. I'm going to go to Kathmandu. And that also meant that I was not going to continue college, right? Dad wasn't happy. But I was kind of, I really had that thing that I just want to do this, so he also kind of knew, I think. And he was like, well, if that's what you want to do, I mean, that's what you want to do, but he really wanted me to finish my degree. Anyways, so we went to Kathmandu. We played at the casino. It was great. I mean, it was awesome. We had our own apartment. The band lived together. It was a blast. I mean, young guys, first year. I mean, you can imagine like 19-year-old or something like that, But soon there was something that happened, and after a year, the gig was gone. Pretty much, it was like, okay, we can't continue with this contract anymore, so we're done. So a lot of the guys the two members in the band were like, okay, we are going home, back to Darjeeling, and I just couldn't do that. Like, I guess I was, I don't know. I don't know if it was stupid or proud or whatever it was. We were just like, no, I think me and my friend, the guitar player, we're just going to continue. We're going to stay here. We're going to figure this out. I mean, it was just too much of, I don't know, a pride, I guess, to say like, hey, Dad, okay, I'm back now. It didn't work out. So we are like, no, we got to push this thing and see what we can do. So now we are left out without a bass player and a drummer, right? I used to play the guitar. So we are looking for a bass player and a drummer because we had to pay bills. We needed to play gigs, and pay our bills. So we are in kind of a dire situation. And I remember Dad called me around that time and said, oh, I heard that your friends are back. What are you still doing there? Kind of thing. And I said, Dad, but I just really want to do music, and I won't stay. And he was like, I think he had, I mean, really kind of, and he is amazing that way. Like, he was a strict dad, a traditional dad. But at the same time, he was also kind of like, he knew when he knew that it was the right thing. So I remember him going like, well, okay, so what, you guys like need money? Like, how can I help? And again, too proud, right? I said, no, Dad, I don't need money, even though we did, but no, we'll take care. But, we do need help. We don't have a bass player. So could you send my brother over so he could play the bass in the band? So Dad was just like, are you kidding me? I mean, like, he was like, one son's already gone, right? And then there's this other son, like he wants his brother to come over now. I mean, and so just so you know, all three of my brothers are musicians right now. So I guess I had something to do with it, so he was like, I mean, my brother had just finished high school, but he really wanted to come. I knew that, and we needed a bass player. So Dad was just kind of, like upset and a little kind of frustrated that like both the sons want to leave and not pursue studies, right? Do music. And he said, well, whatever. I mean, if he wants, that's what he wants to do. I mean, I've got nothing to say, kind of thing, So I said, thanks, Dad. I'm going to talk to him. And I talked to him. He came over. So he was ready to do that. And then it was like, we have a bass player. We've got two guitar players and vocalists. Somehow at that age, we thought like, we got to have a drummer now, it's got to be that band, right? So we couldn't find one. And finally, my brother Praveen and my friend Yogesh, they were the ones who said like, why don't you play the drums? Because we really needed to play those gigs to pay our bills. So like, why don't you play the drums? Like, we'll just do a trio. And I was like, but I've never played the drums. But they were like, you play tabla though. I mean, but I'm like, it's not the same thing. But it's still like, it's a rhythm instrument. You'll figure it out. So that was it. I mean, these guys pushed me to play the drums, and thank God they did that kind of thing, because right now I feel like, thanks, Harish, you left. I mean, the friend of mine who left, he set my path as a drummer, because if he hadn't, I don't know what would have happened, right? But
Yeah,
that's how I
that's
got playing drums.
that's amazing that you started out as a guitarist and turned into a drummer just like that, and now you're this amazing drummer.
Oh,
Yeah.
thank you.
If you have not heard Navin, you should check him out when he plays in town. It's awesome. So talking about, being in rock bands and jamming at your house and all of that, that wasn't jamming as far as what we would consider like a jam session here in the US, like with jazz tunes or things like that, was it?
It was, there was a lot of improvisation.
Yes, of
Let me put
course.
it that way.
But it
Yeah.
wasn't using American jazz standards or anything.
No, it was mostly like the Nepali folk or classical, or bhajans, spiritual tunes.
Yeah.
But so it was more of that. But
So how did you get interested in learning about American jazz?
yeah, like I said, my early, like, just being in that school and the environment that I was in, just, I think, tweaked my interest in knowing about cultures and music. So I was always kind of searching, we'd figure something out and I'm like, oh, but what is this? So that curious, and I think I'm still the same that way. I'm always kind of hungry to find out more about, so I get excited about it.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's how we discovered jazz. Like after the band, we got the band together and we were a trio. We played 6 nights a week, at this tourist district in Kathmandu called Thamel. So we'd have a lot of travelers, tourists who come. There are the bars and clubs and people, hanging out, and there'll be live music pretty much every day, So I remember like playing in Thamel, and we were into more like the 70s rock kind of thing happening, a little bit of funk, and we had just got introduced to James Brown and some of the Motown music, it's so fascinating to, and when I think about it, to think that the music that was happening here, somehow it would get there, even though we didn't have internet and all of that, somehow the music would always travel, that's such a powerful thing about music. I think it just transcends, and some people don't even understand the language, but it has that power to kind of make it feel, right?
Yep.
So we were, into that kind of stuff, and then we play at Thamel, but sometimes there would be these travelers, like tourists, who would be musicians.
Mm-hmm.
And they would come and go like, hey, hey, I'm a sax player. Can I sit in a tune with you? And we'd be, yeah, of course, please. And so they would sit in with us and then play a tune. And, I remember this one time we were playing a Santana tune. We were really into some of the Santana tunes there. And I remember there was a drummer from New York. He just said, hey, I'm from New York. I'm a drummer. Can I sit in? And he pulls out his stick bag. And he started playing. I don't know what tune it was, Soul Sacrifice, something like that, one Santana tune. And I was just blown away by how he played the kit, but this guy was a Cuban jazz drummer. So now, I can understand like where he was coming from. But I was like, what is happening here? So there would be folks like that. We would hang out after the gig and they'd be like, hey man, have you checked this guy out? Or have you listened to this? My first ever jazz tape was Billie Holiday's. Somebody said, oh, have you listened to Billie Holiday? Or like, have you listened to Coltrane? Have you listened to Burr? And we were just like, no. So those days there was no internet. We didn't have access to any of this, CDs so it would be travelers like making us little copies of tapes to listen. I still remember, I don't know, was it Blue Train? I think that was the album, over and over again, because it was that little tape we had. Mm-hmm. Right. So that was how we got introduced to jazz. And then we were just like, what is this? It was like magic, right?
Well,
and,
speaking of this ability of music to kind of transcend and to travel and to come together regardless of the culture. I'd like the people here to hear a little bit more about Jazz Mandu, which is a jazz festival that you've been running over in Kathmandu for what, 20 years?
Almost 20 years. Yep.
And I was fortunate enough to be able to travel to Jazz Mandu in 2017 with the Police Jazz Project. You had the faculty from the University of Idaho come over and play, and we met just an incredible number of musicians from all over the world when we were there. But I'd like you to talk a little bit about that festival and how you got to manage it, and just a little bit about the backstory.
Okay. So the band was getting into jazz. That was the jazz bug had already happened for us. So everything was just, I remember my friend, a really good friend of mine, had just opened a bar. It was this little tiny place. It seemed too small to have any live music. So, but we were so into jazz then, we were like, I think we should open a jazz bar in Kathmandu. What do you think? So that's how this performance thing started in a jazz club in Nepal. So we, with Cherup, we opened the first jazz club in Nepal. It's called the Jazz Upstairs. It's still running. They still have live music going on every Wednesday, Saturday. We started that, and that year, that 2000 year, I think 1999 and 2000 year were like amazing for us because we did so much then. We also, so the jazz bar started. We recorded an album called Celebrating 100 Years of Jazz with Nepali traditional musicians, where we picked out about 10 classic jazz standard tunes, but put it in a way that Nepali traditional instruments could play those melodies. So like Take 5 was played on a bamboo flute and an ishraj on a tabla, but then we have the jazz rhythm section, In a Sentimental Mood is one of my favorite versions played by this instrument called ishraj. So we recorded this album that year, and that really kind of intrigued a lot of people. I had quite a few of my American friends from New York. When they heard that, they were like, wow. I mean, they just hearing those tunes, such familiar tunes played by those instruments was kind of, I guess, fascinating, and that particular CD got into the hands of one of the jazz festival organizers in Australia, Brisbane. The name of the jazz festival, Palmer Street Jazz Festival. Was it Neil Sellers? He was the artistic director. Susan Sellers was a good friend of mine, her dad. So Neil invited us to play in Australia for a jazz festival there. That was our first experience of hearing live trumpets, trombones, all of that stuff, And that is where I think the seeds were planted. We're like, man, because we just loved it. It was this 3-day event. Everything was happening on a street, the Parma Street, and they had the supper club events and all these different things going on, all day, all night kind of thing. And we were like, man, could we do something like this in Kathmandu? It was just a thought. It was just a talk, But, again, when things are meant to happen, I guess it just comes together. The seeds were planted there. We came back to Kathmandu. I met a good friend of ours who's a big jazz fan, but he also owned this huge resort, Suman Sachdev. And we had a conversation with him. He suggested, hey, you guys want to come and play at my place for this particular thing in March? And I was like, oh, we'd love to play, but there's this band from Australia that would love to come and play too. So, I mean, and he was like, really? And I said, oh, we're good friends of ours. They'd love to come. We just need the flight tickets. And he was like, well, I know this guy from Singapore Airlines. Let me talk to him. Next day, he calls me. We got 5 tickets, man. You want to call your friends? Let's do this. And I was like, could we maybe do a 1-day jazz festival? That's how it started. So it's Suman and me, and then Cherup at the bar, and Susan Sellers was there. And the 3 of us, we were like, maybe we could do a jazz festival. So 2002, I'm thinking 2001 winter time, like December, And the first jazz festival was held in March 2002. We had a band from Australia. We had got in touch with this amazing jazz clarinet player, Don Burrows. He's a world famous player. He recently died. We met him in Australia, and he wanted to come. So he came for that festival. We had a band from England. We had a band from India. I mean, it was just all these things kind of came together, you know, and we had the first jazz festival in 2002. And after that, it was like, okay, how do we keep this thing going? You know?
Yeah.
So it's been a year at a time, but it's our 20th year. This is what, 2023. We missed a year because of COVID, but and then there was one more year we missed. We are celebrating in 2024 the 20th Jazz Mandu, but it's been almost more than 20 years, you know.
Yep.
So, and like to your point about cross-cultural thing, one of the major or one of my favorite events of that festival has been where all the visiting artists coming from the US, from Europe, from Africa, you know, from South America, we are all there. We bring our musical backgrounds and our cultures, but we get a chance to work together and practice for 2 days and do a performance.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah, no, that's one of my most favorite memories of all of my musical experiences was
Right? Yeah, it is my favorite part of the festival, where everybody, I mean, you know, a lot of the times we don't even understand languages, you know, there's that communication there. We have a little challenge there, but when it comes to the music, then everybody's on the same page kind of thing, right? Somehow that transcends, you know.
Yep. So let's flash forward, because I fear that we're going to run out of time.
I know. I thought about this. I was like, the story was so long. It's
there's so much.
so much.
There, and I hope that other people on this call will take advantage of reaching out to you and visiting more as we approach the festival. But let's talk about how you got introduced to the Lionel Hampton Jazz Festival first, about how that album that you created was a part of that.
That was a part of it. Yep. So 2004 was my first trip to Moscow, Idaho, the United States. I came to visit my wife's family. That summer in June, it was a dinner at Diane Walker's house, and my in-laws are George and Leanne. They are, you know, family friends. So we were invited there, and I met Dan Buckfitch, and that was my first introduction to him. And I think we hit it off right away. And next day it was like, oh, Navin, you should come check out the music school, you know. And so I came to the school next day, and he showed me around. And you know, I think that summer I spent the 1.5 months or so I was here, I spent a lot of time in the music building, you know, hanging out with Dan, right? I mean, yeah, he's the man. We were chatting, and then, you know, we were talking about background. He wanted to hear about my stories and everything. And I just brought that CD I was telling you guys about earlier. We recorded with traditional musicians with the jazz standards, and I played it for Dan. And Dan was like, wow, that sounds great, Navin, you know. Man, we should go down to Doc Skinner's office, go to the Jazz Fest office. Doc should listen to this album, you know. And I said, sure. So we walked down from the music building to the Pittman, where the Jazz Fest office used to be before. And he introduced me to Doc, and Doc was like, hey, you know, Navin, I was from Kathmandu. I mean, he was so fascinated with all of that, right? And so Dan went, Doc, you got to listen to this album. And he put it on for Doc. And he started listening to it. And after a while, he was like, man, that sounds great, Navin. It's beautiful. You know, Doc was so like, I mean, the way Doc is, like his way, that sounds good, mate. Like, and then one thing led to the other. I think we were just talking to the Lionel Hampton Jazz Festival, you know, because I was just soaking in the whole thing, like looking at posters and going like, man, like look at who were there at this festival, right? From Ella Fitzgerald to Sarah Vaughan to Dizzy Gillespie. I was just getting blown away. I mean, there was so much happening for me here, meeting Dan and then meeting Doc. And then suddenly he goes, you guys should come for the festival next year. And I was like, oh, I mean, that absolutely. I mean, we love it, you know. So we'd love to. And he was like, well, we talked a little bit of logistics and how it could be possible, etc. Like, you know, plus visas and all of that stuff. And I said, we definitely need an invitation, you know, for paperwork and all. So yeah, he was like, we'll write an invitation right now. You can take it with you. So he wrote an invitation, printed it on the letterhead. By the time I left, I had an invitation to come for the next 2005 Lionel Hampton Jazz Festival with Cadenza and friends from Nepal. So, well, that was my first kind of introduction to like meeting Dan and then Doc and the Jazz Festival. You know, I spent a lot of time with Dan that summer. We built a drum. I still have that drum, you know, and I spent a lot of time practicing in the building. But going back home to Kathmandu, I was there with an invitation to play at the Lionel Hampton Jazz Festival. So I went to the musicians we got together. I was like, boys, we have an invitation to go play in February, you know, at the Lionel Hampton Jazz Festival. So everybody was super excited. We started planning, everything going on here, you know. I think it was around December we applied for the visas. And you know, first when I talked to the person with the application, she was like, yeah, you know, it'll take about a month or so. It's just a visitor's visa. It should be pretty straightforward. So we're like, okay, whatever paperwork's needed, we got in the invitation, everything from here. And then I get a call a week later, and somebody was on the phone going like, Navin, but there's a situation with your application. This application cannot be through a visitor's visa. It needs a P visa, which is a performance visa. And this is something that had just happened there with the State Department, you know, where the performance visa were needed for any performance. Even if you were staying for a week, you needed a performance visa. And I was like, well, sure, then, you know, let's get a performance visa. And she goes like, well, the thing is, a performance visa takes about 6 months to process. And we were like, well, so, you know, there's no chance, you know, we only have 2 more months. So I talked to Doc. I mean, everybody from here, we had such community support, like people writing to different people, sending letters from senators and all of that. But man, it was just not gonna happen, you know.
Yeah, that's too. What a shame that you didn't get to enjoy being a performer, but you did get your picture on the poster, didn't you?
Yeah, we were already on the poster. Yeah, the band was on the poster with, I mean, Paquito de Rivera, all these guys were there that year, you know. And yeah, but the band couldn't come. So I still had my visa, so I came to just be a part of the festival. You know, I still remember other meeting Doc and everybody, and you know, I think I played. Dan invited me to play with there was a Jerry Mulligan big band. That was a combo of students and faculty from our school, you know, LHS. So I sat in, played some percussion with the big band at the International Ballroom. Now thinking about it, you know, where that was. So so that year was I think the year that I also started thinking like, you know, maybe I want to go to school. And I started talking to Dan that when I was here that year for the Jazz Fest, and I think auditions or something like that was also going on. You know, he said something like, yeah, you just sit for an audition, come to, you know, 2:13 and, you know, play some drums kind of thing.
Very cool. So you went from, you know, not knowing a whole lot about the University of Idaho to getting an invitation within days to come and perform at the Jazz Festival, not getting to come to the Jazz Festival, but then you ended up kind of finding your place here and getting your undergraduate degree and your master's. And like I said earlier, you came and you taught for the School of Music,
Mhm.
different capacities, part-time, and then now you are leading the Jazz Festival as a Jazz Festival manager. Welcome to the team. And
It's great to be in the team.
yeah, it is. It's awesome to be a part of the team. And I'm so glad that you are a part of the team. So what do you want to see happen with the festival? What is it like to be a part of the team?
You know, I was thinking about it earlier, and I was like, I was here as a student, and I was a part of the Jazz Festival. I still remember that first year we had a combo. I think our combo won that year, 2008 or something. So I was a student performing, and then I performed at the Jazz Festival as an artist. I've adjudicated as an adjudicator, and done workshops at the Jazz Festival. So it's like all these different roles that could be there in the festival has happened for me, and I take that as a blessing. And here I am. It's almost like a full circle, right? So here I am, managing a jazz festival, the Lionel Hampton Jazz Festival, and meeting Doc the other day, when we met Doc and we were talking about it, just made me realize, like, it's a big deal. It's a big deal. It's a huge legacy. Sometimes I feel like, maybe we take it for granted that, like, the festival happens every year, but it's a big deal that a festival like this has been going on in our community here tucked away in the Northwest for 56 years, where folks like Dizzy Gillespie, Sarah Vaughan, Ella Fitzgerald, I mean, the name goes on and on. I mean, I was, hearing stories about Ella at Dan's office. She's walked our music school hall. I mean, it's incredible, right? So I take this as a huge honor, and these are big shoes to fill. But
what do you see as the most unique thing about the Jazz Festival here at the Lionel?
One of the most unique thing is the educational aspect of it. Having that, all these students who come, imagine the inspiration they get, that interaction. Sometimes I think, like, what would it would have been if I was one of those students, growing up in the hills of Darjeeling, having that chance to do this, right? How cool is that? So no, that's, I think, definitely one of the most unique aspect of the festival is the educational aspect. Jazz in the schools, that's another super cool thing, I think, where artists go to different schools around the area, right? But also the fact that, in our beautiful little community, all these artists have come, and every year they would come, from Lou Rawls to, like, I mean, it just blows my mind every time I think of the list of folks who we hear and performed, and it's super cool.
Yeah. So speaking of, this year's festival is going to be a little bit different. It's a brand new festival in some ways.
It is a brand new festival.
Moved to April 19th through the 22nd. All the concerts are going to be in the new ICCU arena. And we have a pretty eclectic lineup. Do you want to talk a little bit about the lineup for the festival this year?
Yeah. So, grounded in tradition and breaking new ground has been our slogan. And I just wanted to bring that in a little bit before I just talk about the artists. But the tradition and is Doc's legacy and Hamp's legacy, and moving forward, we are also looking at all these different avenues. So last year, we merged the World Music Celebration, which is something I've been involved with for the past 11 years now at the Lionel Hampton School of Music, where we invite an artist from different parts of the world. We've had people from Africa to Spain to Greece, I mean, Europe, all of these places, So we merged World Music Celebration with the Lionel Hampton Jazz Festival last year, and we wanted to continue with that because that got such a positive response, right? So this year too, the Thursday night concert is gonna be Habib Idrisu. He's an amazing drummer and dancer coming from Ghana. we have Marshall Gilks, who's an amazing trombone player, was just featured on the Downbeat magazine, the last March issue. And he's going to be here in town. So that Thursday night is basically Habib, Marshall, in collaboration with our student ensembles, Vern's big band and the big choir with Dan, and also the world music, the world beat ensemble that I'll be directing. And so we're going to put that whole concert together. So that's Thursday night. Talking about the major evening concerts here, and then on Friday night, we have an amazing group of women jazz musicians, so we have we have Diva Jazz Orchestra, who's it's a big band consisting of all women artists. And then we have Sage, it's a vocal quartet group, all women vocal quartet group. And we are hoping that this will be also a chance for us to celebrate, 50 years of the Women's Center and Title IX on that Friday. So we have a little montage planned where we are going to feature some of the iconic women jazz artists who have been here at the Lionel Hampton Jazz Festival, and do a little kind of celebration video for them, and then Saturday is the headliner. So we've got Marcus Miller, one of the living jazz bass player legends, I guess. He's one of the major guy who was so influential in Miles's fusion era. The music of the tune that was very famous was Sutu, that Miles and Marcus actually wrote that tune. Miles made it famous, but I think it was Marcus Miller's tune. So we have him as the headliner, and then of course the legendary Lionel Hampton Big Band, from New York. So that's the evening lineup. And then the Wednesday, I think this is again something that we are bringing back, which used to be a big part of the tradition, is the Hamps Gala in the evening, where our LHSM student ensembles used to perform Hamp, right? That was the tradition where you'd come and go like, hey, these are my students. So you'd be excited to see their performances. So we are bringing that tradition back. And then during the daytime, we are going to have few of our artists, the Grammy Band, the Lionel Hampton Rhythm Section, and Doug Goodkin go in 3 different routes for jazz in the schools, visiting different schools in the area. So that's kind of in the nutshell.
So yeah, there's no shortage of things to participate in. If
There's
you
no shortage
in jazz, you can do it pretty much 24/7 from the night.
Absolutely. And of course, all day it's going to be clinics and workshops and student performance. So 4 days of packed events,
Yeah. And so what would you tell someone who is maybe thinking about coming to the Jazz Festival, never has been? How would you encourage them to participate?
I think it's such an amazing vibe, that week, that energy is so up there, so because there's music happening everywhere, right? The downtown gets lit up, and like we have, after our sessions of music. So if you want to be in a vibe where the music is going to be magic, I think that's going to be the week to be here in Moscow, Idaho, and at the university.
Yep. Great.
I'd be happy to answer questions if.
That's what I was going to say. Sandy, did you want to field some questions from the crowd, or?
We just had one, and you kind of touched on it a little bit earlier, but when there are challenges about going to pursue music and your father and all of that, and you seemed very into that. But one of the questions was, now I lost it. What challenges was there while pursuing music? I mean, was it getting gigs? Like, can you expand on the challenges over the years?
I mean, I think music probably is a challenge no matter where you are, right? To pursue music it's a hard thing to do, especially when you're like, starting, right? Nobody knows you, and you're trying to, set yourself up that people are going to recognize you, and and plus there's this whole thing of learning and practicing and the knowledge of it, until you have that. It's also frustrating. You hear all these great players, right? But you're like, how do they do that? I mean, so many sleepless nights where you're just kind of like, you don't get it, right? And I think that's where a teacher becomes kind of crucial to kind of guide you, and which I personally didn't have at that point, because we got into being professional musicians so fast that just didn't get a chance to really, cultivate my skills and all that, so it's challenging. It's challenging in so many different ways. I mean, getting gigs, that's its own challenge. I mean, I've gone knocking on clubs and bars doors, literally, like just going there, hey guys, do you want a band to play? We've got this. I mean, like, and it was a time of no internet, so it's not like you can have your Facebook page and you can do this and that and all of that, right? So it was literally, I mean, we didn't even have a tape at that time, right? So it was like, I don't even have a tape to go like, this is our music. It was more like, yeah, we're a great band. I mean, like, how do you convince them, or what do you show, right? So it's challenging. But I guess the important thing is, like, like my dad used to say, actually, if you keep on doing what you love to do, I mean,
Right.
it's gonna work out.
And it's never a job when you keep doing what you love doing. Now we're getting a bunch of questions. And so one or both of you can touch on this. For those people in the audience tonight that are not do not have a background in music or jazz, how did Lionel Hampton get connected to the University of Idaho?
Well, that is a question maybe Vanessa could help me too, right?
Yeah. So it's my understanding that there was a trombone player who played in Lionel Hampton's big band that had a connection back here with Doc Skinner, and knew Doc Skinner, and may have even gone to school here. I'm not quite clear on that particular detail, but there was a trombone player in Lionel Hampton's big band in New York that had some connection with Doc Skinner. And it was, back in the day where Doc Skinner was just inviting folks to come out, and he thought that perhaps he could have the Lionel Hampton Big Band out. And he did have the big band out one year, but Lionel ended up loving it out here so much that he just kept coming back. He kept asking to come back. And so he came back year after year for several years, until there was a day that Doc Skinner thought, well, I wonder if he would like this festival named after him. And so, yes, and of course, he said, I would love to have the festival named after me. And then a few years later, in 1985 or 6, the band director, the wind ensemble director here at the time, Bob Spevacek, came into the office of the director of the department and said, you know what? Why couldn't we name the School of Music after Lionel Hampton? It could be done. And he said, well, that's a pretty good idea. And so he went and they asked Lionel if he would like his name on the school. And he said, absolutely, I would love to. And that's one of the things about this Hamps Gala concert that we're doing again, where Lionel used to come in the night before the festival would start, and all of the ensembles in the School of Music, not just the jazz ensembles, but the wind ensemble and the orchestra and pianists would perform. So all of the students would have a little spotlight feature piece to play for not only Lionel Hampton, but then all of Lionel Hampton's band members. They would all come to this concert, and Lionel sat in the front row and was very proud to show off that he had a school of music. He just didn't have a jazz school. He had a school of music of all of these students that did all of these things. And so we're bringing back this concert, and we're doing it again this year. Doc Skinner will be at that concert, and he'll be sitting in the front row, and you'll notice that there's a dozen red roses sitting next to Doc Skinner, and those are to represent Lionel Hampton. So it's a big tradition for us, and an important one.
Great. Now we have a bunch of questions. So the people, if you asked a question and we didn't get to it, I get them on the backside, and I will make sure to forward them both to Vanessa and Navin, and we can get them answered for you. So I apologize that we are running out of time. I'm going to have one more question to you, or two-part question. There was one, ask Navin to talk about his recent award from Nepal. And then who do you listen to at home? Who's the most influential jazz musicians? Who do you listen to at home? So, and that will kind of we'll end it on that note.
So what was the first part of the question?
To talk a little bit about the recent award that you got from Nepal.
Oh, recent award. Okay. Which one was it? I'm thinking about it. Was it the one with the album, the Himalayan Songlines album?
It does not say. Sorry.
Okay. Well, if it's yeah, it's the album that was nominated for 5 different categories.
Okay.
It's the latest album the band came up with. It's still the name is still the same band that we had in college, called Cadenza Collective, and the name of the album is the Himalayan Songlines. It was released in 2019. It's got a eclectic mix of Nepali folk music, a little bit of jazz, a little bit of African grooves. So yeah, if you get a chance, please listen to it. You can find Cadenza Collective online. There's a website. There's all of that stuff right now. You can check it out. What was the other part of the question? Was who do I listen to?
Who's been your most influential, and who do you like to listen to at home to relax?
John Coltrane.
Okay.
Yep.
That was an easy answer for you.
That's it.
Okay, perfect.